You have been disappearing, slowly, quietly, canceling plans you used to keep, letting calls ring out, sitting alone in rooms where you used to crave company. And the terrifying part is not that it is happening. The terrifying part is that it is happening. The terrifying part is that it feels like relief. The world tells you something is wrong with you. It calls you antisocial. It calls you depressed. It hands you a diagnosis and a prescription and tells you to rejoin the noise. Arthur Schopenhauer would tell you the opposite. He would tell you that your withdrawal is not a symptom. It is an awakening. And the fact that it frightens you means it is already too late to go back. There is a pattern that repeats across centuries, across cultures, across every field of human achievement. The sharpest minds always pull away, not in dramatic, performative exile, not with manifestos or announcements. They simply stop showing up. They grow quiet. They become harder to reach. And everyone around them assumes they are broken. They are not broken. They have seen something the rest cannot. And once you see it, the crowd becomes unbearable. You noticed it for the first time years ago, maybe at a party, maybe at a work event, maybe at a dinner with people you were supposed to love. Everyone was talking, and you suddenly felt the air leave the room, not because of conflict, not because of drama, because of the sheer staggering emptiness of what was being said. Hours of conversation, nothing communicated. Laughter with no joy behind it. Opinions borrowed from algorithms. Intimacy performed but never felt. You looked around the table and realized you were the only person in the room who noticed. And that was the loneliest moment of your life. You tried to fix it. You tried harder. You initiated deeper conversations. You asked real questions. You made yourself vulnerable first, hoping someone would match you. They stared at you like you had broken an unspoken rule, because you had. The unspoken rule of modern social life is simple. Do not go beneath the surface. The surface is where everyone has agreed to live. It is warm there. It is safe. It is comfortable. And it is killing you. Schopenhauer understood this architecture better than any thinker who ever lived. In the wisdom of life, he wrote something that should be tattooed on the inside of every intelligent person's skull. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. The moment he enters society, he is expected to shrink, to round off his edges, to flatten his depth until he fits the mold of acceptable company. You have been shrinking for years. You have been so good at it that you forgot what your actual shape was. This is not misanthropy. That is the label society slaps on anyone who refuses to participate in its performance. Schopenhauer was not a man who hated people. He was a man who loved depth, and depth is the one thing people will not give you. They will give you their time. They will give you their laughter. They will give you their bodies and their secrets and their money, but they will not give you their depth. Because most of them do not have it. It was never developed. It was never demanded. The world does not reward depth. It rewards volume. It rewards frequency. It rewards the person who posts, who speaks, who fills every silence with noise. And you are drowning in that noise. The exhaustion you feel is not physical. You can sleep 12 hours and wake up depleted. You can take a vacation surrounded by beauty and return more drained than when you left, because the exhaustion is cognitive. It is the tax your brain pays for constantly translating itself into a simpler language. Every interaction with a surface-level mind forces you to compress your thoughts, dilute your observations, and perform a version of yourself that is palatable to people who have no appetite for complexity. You are running the most sophisticated software on the planet, and every social interaction forces you to downgrade to a version that barely functions. The lag is destroying you. Kahneman called it cognitive depletion. Your mental resources are finite. Every act of self-suppression, every shallow conversation you endure, every fake laugh you produce, costs you something real. It is not metaphorical. It is neurological. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of your highest thinking, is being hijacked to manage the social performance. The part of your brain that should be creating, analyzing, building is instead occupied with the full-time job of pretending to be ordinary. And you wonder why your best ideas come at 2 a.m. alone when the performance finally stops. This is why the sharpest minds escape, not because they are fragile mod, because they cannot handle the world. Because the world is charging them a price that no one else in the room is paying. The extrovert walks into a gathering and gains energy. You walk into the same gathering and hemorrhage it. The difference is not personality, it is processing depth. You are not experiencing the same event they are. You are experiencing 10 times the data, 10 times the subtext, 10 times the emotional undercurrent. You see the micro expressions. You hear the things that are not being said. You feel the tension beneath the pleasantries. You are absorbing the full bandwidth of human interaction while they are skimming the surface. Of course, you are exhausted. You are doing 10 times the work. Schopenhauer saw this with surgical precision. He described ordinary society as the kind of music you only enjoy from a distance. Up close, it is noise. From far away, the chaos blends into something tolerable. This is why the intelligent mind craves distance. Not because it despises humanity, because proximity is pain. Every step closer to the crowd is a step further from yourself. And there comes a point, and you may have already reached it, where the distance between who you are in public and who you are alone becomes so vast that it feels like you are living two separate lives. The public you is a character, the private you is a ghost, and the ghost is starving. So you pull away, and the guilt begins. They notice. They always notice you've changed. You're so distant lately. You think you're better than everyone. The accusations land, and they land hard, because part of you believes them. Part of you has been trained since childhood to equate sociability with goodness, to believe that the desire to be alone is a deficiency that needs to be corrected. Society has spent your entire life programming you with a single relentless message. Belonging is survival. Isolation is death. Schopenhauer would tell you to burn that program to the ground. He would tell you that the loneliness you feel in a crowded room is infinitely more dangerous than the solitude you feel in an empty one. One is a slow poison, the other is medicine. You are not withdrawing from life. You are withdrawing from the performance of life. And those are two radically different things. But the guilt has teeth. It bites at 11 p.m. when you are lying in the dark wondering if you are becoming something cold. It whispers that your parents did not raise you to sit alone in a room reading dead philosophers. It reminds you of the friend who stopped calling because you kept saying no. It tells you that the warmth you feel in solitude is a trick, that you are building a prison and calling it a sanctuary. You need to understand where this guilt comes from, because until you do, it will drag you back into the noise every single time. The guilt is not yours, it is inherited. Evolutionary psychology explains it with brutal simplicity. For hundreds of thousands of years, exclusion from the tribe meant death, not metaphorical death, actual, physical, eaten by predators death. Your nervous system is still running that ancient software. When you pull away from the group, your amygdala fires a distress signal identical to the one it would fire if you were being stalked by a lion. Your body cannot tell the difference between choosing solitude and being abandoned on the savannah. The guilt you feel is not moral, it is biological. It is a survival alarm ringing in an era where the threat no longer exists. You are not in danger, you are in evolution. And evolution is painful. Schopenhauer framed it differently but arrived at the same destination. He wrote that society is a fire. The cold person moves close to warm himself, but if he moves too close, he burns. Most people accept the burn because they have never known warmth from any other source. They press their skin against the flame because the alternative, generating their own heat, requires a kind of inner richness they have never been forced to develop. You are different. You have that inner richness. You have always had it. It is the thing that makes you restless in simple company. It is the thing that makes small talk feel like chewing glass. Your mind generates its own warmth. It always has. The crowd was never your fire. It was someone else's. And you have been standing in it, burning, because no one ever told you it was acceptable to walk away. Now here is where it gets dangerous. Because solitude is not automatically sacred. Solitude without purpose is just loneliness with better marketing. The sharp minds who escape society and then sit in their rooms scrolling, numbing, avoiding, they have not escaped anything. They have traded one cage for another. The first cage was noise. The second cage is emptiness, and emptiness will eat you alive if you do not fill it with something that demands everything you have. Schopenhauer spent his solitude writing. Newton spent his in mathematics. Nietzsche walked. Kafka stayed up until dawn, filling notebooks with sentences that drew blood. These men did not retreat from the world because they were weak. They retreated because the world was too small for what they needed to do. Their solitude was not passive. It was furnace hot. It was productive isolation, the kind where you close the door, not to hide from life, but to build something too large to construct in the presence of interruption. You must understand this distinction, or your withdrawal will destroy you. There is a version of solitude that heals and a version that hollows. The difference is intention. If you are pulling away to avoid pain, you are running. If you are pulling away to create depth, you are ascending. The direction looks the same from the outside. From the inside, they are opposite trajectories. One leads to stagnation. The other leads to everything you have ever wanted to build but could never start because the world kept tapping you on the shoulder. Cal Newport calls it deep work. The ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. He found that this capacity is becoming increasingly rare at precisely the time it is becoming increasingly valuable. The economy of the future belongs to the person who can think deeply, and deep thinking requires what society calls antisocial behavior. It requires closed doors. It requires ignored messages. It requires the willingness to be temporarily hated by people who do not understand that your absence is not a rejection of them. It is an investment in something they will eventually benefit from, even if they never know it. But society will punish you for it. Make no mistake about that. The system is not designed for depth. It is designed for availability. The modern workplace rewards the person who responds in 30 seconds, who is always on, always reachable, always performing productivity, whether or not they're actually producing anything of value. The person who disappears for 4 hours to think, truly think, is viewed with suspicion. Where were you? Why didn't you answer? Are you even committed to this? The corporate world has perfected the art of mistaking presence for contribution. And the person who contributes the most is often the one who is present the least. Schopenhauer would not survive a single day in a modern open-plan office. The man who wrote that noise is the most impertinent of all forms of interruption, would have set the ping-pong table on fire. He understood that every interruption is not just a break in concentration, it is a break in consciousness. When you are pulled out of deep thought by a trivial question, a notification, a colleague who wants to chat about last night's television, you do not simply resume where you left off. The thread is severed. The architecture of the idea you were constructing collapses. You have to rebuild it from the foundation. And by the time you do, another interruption arrives. This is why you feel like you never finish anything. This is why your best thinking happens in stolen hours. The world is systematically preventing you from using the one asset that makes you dangerous. So you escape. But where do you go? This is where most intelligent people fail. They understand the need for withdrawal, but they have no framework for what withdrawal should look like. They quit the party, but do not build the cathedral. They leave the noise, but do not create the signal. Schopenhauer built a life of extraordinary discipline inside his solitude. He woke at the same time every day. He wrote for a fixed number of hours. He walked the same route with his poodle. He played the flute. He read voraciously but selectively. His solitude was not an absence of structure. It was the most rigorous structure imaginable, stripped of every element that did not serve his highest function. You need a protocol, not a vague intention to spend more time alone. A protocol, a non-negotiable architecture for your solitude that protects it from the constant gravitational pull of other people's needs. You need hours that are sacred, hours where the phone is dead, the door is closed, and the only voice in the room is the one inside your head that has been trying to speak for years but keeps getting drowned out by the cacophony of obligations you never agreed to. And here's the part no one tells you. When you finally create that silence, when you finally sit down in the empty room with nothing but your own mind, the first thing you will feel is not peace, it is terror, because you have been using the noise as anesthesia. The constant social performance, the endless availability, the manufactured busyness, it was all a drug. It kept you from hearing the questions your own mind has been asking you. Questions like, what do I actually want? What am I afraid of? What have I been avoiding by pretending to be busy? Who am I when I am not performing for someone else? These questions are excruciating. They are supposed to be. Schopenhauer believed that boredom is the proof of existence. When the distractions are removed and you are left with nothing but yourself, you confront the raw fact of your own consciousness. Most people cannot survive this confrontation. They reach for the phone. They turn on the television. They call someone, anyone, to fill the void. But you must sit in it. You must let the boredom bore through you until it hits something solid. Because beneath the boredom is the bedrock of who you actually are. And that bedrock is the foundation on which everything meaningful in your life will be built. Nietzsche, who built much of his philosophy on Schopenhauer's bones, wrote that the man who cannot endure 2 hours of his own company is a slave. Look at your life honestly. How long can you sit in a room with no inputs? No phone, no music, no screens, no other humans. 10 minutes before the itch starts, 5. The length of time you can endure your own unmediated presence is the exact measure of your inner development. If the number is small, you have work to do. Not out there. In here, the world will keep calling you back. It will use every weapon in its arsenal. It will use obligation. It will use guilt. It will use love. Your mother will ask why you never visit. Your friends will stage interventions. Your partner will say you are emotionally unavailable. And some of these accusations will contain grains of truth, which makes them infinitely more dangerous than outright lies. Because the grain of truth will make you doubt yourself. It will make you think the retreat was a mistake. It will make you open the door just a crack. And the noise will rush back in like water through a hull breach, flooding every room you spent months building in the quiet. This is where you need Schopenhauer's coldest, hardest teaching. He wrote that we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. 3/4. Look at that number. It means that the version of you that shows up to dinner parties, that laughs at jokes that are not funny, that nods along to opinions that are intellectually bankrupt, that person is operating on 25% of your actual capacity. You have been living your entire life as a quarter of yourself. And the world has the audacity to call that connection, real connection. The kind your soul is starving for does not happen at dinner parties. It does not happen in group chats. It happens when two minds meet in the deep water, where the pressure is high and the oxygen is thin and most people cannot breathe. It happens in letters, in long, uninterrupted conversations at 3 a.m., in the shared silence between two people who do not need to perform for each other. Schopenhauer had very few friends, but the friendships he had were forged in philosophical fire. They were rare and they were real. He did not need 100 connections. He needed 3 that went to the bottom. You do not need more people in your life. You need fewer people and more depth. You need to stop distributing yourself across dozens of shallow relationships that leave you feeling emptier than you were before. You need to find the 2 or 3 minds that operate at your frequency and protect those connections with everything you have. Let the rest go. Not with cruelty, with clarity. You are not rejecting them. You are accepting your own limitations. You are acknowledging that your energy is finite and that spending it on surfaces means you will never reach the depths. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is believing you are above other people. This is architecture. It is designing a life that matches the specifications of your mind. A racing engine does not belong in traffic. It belongs on a track. You have been idling in traffic for years, overheating, burning fuel, going nowhere, surrounded by vehicles that were designed for exactly this speed. You were not. You were built for something that requires open road and no speed limit. And every day you spend in traffic is a day your engine wears down, your parts corrode, and your potential quietly rusts into nothing. Schopenhauer died alone in his apartment in Frankfurt. His poodle was at his feet. His housekeeper found him sitting upright on the sofa, as if he had simply decided to stop. The newspapers barely noticed. The academic establishment he had warred against for decades did not mourn him. The world moved on the same afternoon, and yet, 2 centuries later, his words are still detonating in the minds of people who read them. His solitude produced work that outlived every crowded room he ever left. His isolation was not a failure of living. It was the price of permanence. You will not be remembered for the parties you attended. You will not be remembered for the group chats you contributed to. You will not be remembered for being available, for being agreeable, for being easy to get along with. You will be remembered, if you are remembered at all, for the thing you built in the silence, for the thought you followed to its end, for the work that could only have been born in a room where no one was watching and no one was clapping and no one was asking you to be smaller than you are. The door is open. It has always been open. The only thing keeping you in the room is the fear of what they will say when you walk through it. Let them say it. Their words are noise. And you will finally learn to hear the silence.